So here's a short video on why I took the angle of barriers to well-being. Perhaps it was my own barriers. Perhaps it's because I've had the well-being revolution flaunted to me, how easy it is. You know, just meditate 10 minutes, just do this. Also have had this Buddhist background, so I understand that meditation is a huge part of growing and evolving. And now neuroscience and all the studies on brain plasticity and neuroscience that shows how meditation shapes and changes and molds and sculpts the brain in different ways is also added a lot of depth. But to me, there's always these barriers in the way, and barriers are based upon my habits, you know, what I tend to do instead of meditation. So I tend to procrastinate. I tend to occasionally have the odd cigarette. I tend to drink alcohol. I tend to think certain ways and certain patterns and have certain habits and responses in relation to behaviour. So all of these things that I do, but not only that, I've encountered a lot of people in my life who have had traumas or are going through traumas, who are difficult to be around, who present challenging behaviour, who are complex in the way they think about things. And part of the reasoning behind barriers is that I think one of the key things that I heard from Pema Chodron was doing a teaching, and it was never underestimate the level of human neuroses. You know, we are actually incredibly complicated people, beings. What goes on inside of us is so shocking in many ways, in terms of, you know, what we think about, how we try and portray ourselves, what we take from society, how that molds us, what we give off, how we come into the world, whether we believe it's from God or reincarnation or whatever it is. We have all these unique ways of being, and this whole melting pot of what it is to be human presents so many different challenges that for me it's not so simple to go, okay, let's concentrate on breathing, let's do some gratitude, you know, let's meditate for 20 minutes, we'll do some body scan or some breathing, and that's it. You know, it's not enough. And as someone who's been brought up with Buddhism, I know that mindfulness is a huge part, a fundamental part of Buddhism, but that sits at the root, at the heart of the entire teachings. Yet there is countless and reams and reams and reams of other teachings that go with it. You know, and only then, you know, are we potentially, you know, having this kind of transformative perspective on the world. So a huge journey, and that I don't necessarily think that us in the West will be fully accustomed to, especially if we're not Buddhist, you know, because this isn't Buddhist. We are now at an age in which we are losing labels, losing old religious labels that have potentially categorized us and, you know, limited our thinking. And now what we're doing is we're following this kind of science revolution. And science is now showing us about meditation. So in many ways there's a new language that's emerging here, and mindfulness, in terms of how it's understood from a Western perspective, is part of that language. And this is where equanimity can be part of that language too. But my approach to equanimity was through barriers, because I personally believe that we have so many different nuances in relation to how we may or may not achieve well-being. So my PhD started with barriers to equanimity, and there were 4 key areas. There was the innate realm, there was the social realm, there was the interactive realm, and then there's the reflective realm. So there's 4 huge domains and spheres, or whatever you want to call it, that act as barriers towards our own feeling of equanimity or mental balance, mental harmony. Because these 4 areas are how we formulate judgments. But, you know, you can't just look at judgments and go, oh, why do you judge the way you do? You have to look at kind of these areas that influence and colour or shape your trajectory of how you might judge the way you do. Number 1 innate sense. So that this is the idea that we come into the world with a unique biological disposition. And that's actually, scientifically backed up by numerous big wigs in the psychological field, how we are different. I think, we all know we're different. You can have identical twins that display complete different characteristics and thought patterns, etc. We come into the world and we are completely different regardless of how our parents raise us. So this, for this you need to have an open mind here. It's either come from above, we've been reborn with it, or it's completely material, it's irrelevant, it's to do with DNA and geneticism, or it's completely to do with the environment. Whatever it is, we've come into the world and we are unique. There is something in us that is different from our neighbour. That's number one. So the idea is if we really relate strongly to who we, our sense of self, then we'll have certain innate barriers towards equanimity, because we're always relating in a way that solidifies self-construct. And self-construct, when I talk about self-construct, is like, who are we? Fight-flight is often an overused thing now that we all talk about, but it's useful because it talks about, our primal kind of instincts. And this is where all this kind of innate stuff comes into fruition too. It's kind of, if there's someone over there threatening, I'll probably, I know me, I'll run out there. But, I could fight back because there's some kind of compulsion in my amygdala that, is like just freaked out, turns on. So this is the innate sense of, why we judge things. Because so I'll immediately go, oh, that's danger, or that's nice, based upon, how closely I relate to myself, because, I feel threatened or something like that. So the innate realm is hard to capture, but basically if you really believe that you are a fixed self, that you're this kind of unchanging person on the planet, then you're up against it in terms of innate barriers to equanimity, because the human is constantly changing. Me now is unrecognizable from me, a few years ago. All my skin cells will have changed. All the blood, every 7 years it completely transforms, changes. Physiologically, I might have the same old deteriorating organs, but mentally my thoughts are completely different. There's not much about me that's the same, other than the story of me that's the same. I'm Joey, yeah. I was labelled Joey as a child, and now I relate to Joey. I have this mum and dad, and we have certain dynamics together, and I've got this system. We have certain behavioural things that happen, and I play this role, and I like to be liked, and I don't like to be not liked, and all of this stuff. So if I really identify myself strongly as I am, as a fixed sense, then I will have innate barriers to equanimity. Because with equanimity, you need to be constantly fluid and adapting to change, and on a moment-to-moment level, completely being aware of how your feelings relate to the moment. Feelings, I mean, the discrimination faculties like dyslexia and neutralities, how they shape and influence and colour the present moment experience. And the more loose and open you can be with that, then the less barriers to equanimity you'll have. So the more you relate to yourself as a kind of non-fixed self, gives you a good chance in that innate one. The social one is a bit more easy to explain, because we live in a social world. There's two parts of the social. There's either how we want to be perceived, so I want to be liked, so I will act a certain way, I will be a certain person in order to be liked and to achieve and to flourish in whatever capacity I want. At the same time, society influences me from the top down too. So, I'll get up this morning and I'll pick up the newspaper and I'll read some shocking headlines, and that impacts me, or I'll turn on the news, or the media, or the politicians will be saying this, and, all the institutions, etc., they mould how I feel about myself and others. They shape my experience and colour it. So it kind of construct this kind of social reality of who I think I am. So we've got innate, social, interactive. This is the closest relates to mindfulness, and that the interactive part of it is that when you are ever present, there is a huge amount of things that are going on in this moment. And unless we're completely present orientated, there'll be so much distraction. And part of that distraction comes from our physiological well-being. So if we've slept well the night before, or how distracted we are, or the fact that we've met this person before and we'll already bring to the conversation previous moments. So we'll have previous feelings towards this person before we've actually met them. It's also all the propensity to be distracted, to talking to someone but fixated on the colour of their clothes, or the fact that they've breath smells, or whatever it is, the whole level of interaction. Anything that takes us out of that and connects us with a kind of mental story rather than just being here is an interactive barrier to equanimity. And then finally, the fourth one is the reflective barrier or domain. This is to do with memory. So it's, if we have a conversation, I'll finish the conversation, I'll start doing something else, and then I'll think, oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that person. They're really nice, aren't they? It'll form a big categorization within me that I'll remember that. And it's also links to how often we are distracted and lost in memories too, or how much we use memories to formulate present moment interaction. So they're the four domains in general, basically. So innate, social, interactive, reflective. And the idea is that all these four kind of huge areas shape the way in which we judge. It gives rise to the propensity of our judgments towards things. So we have to become aware of these in order to lessen our barriers to equanimity. Because with non-awareness, we can't do anything. We're just going to be our distracted selves, running on autopilot, rarely thinking of, well-being, rarely thinking of others' well-being, and just living a quite shallow existence in many ways. So through awareness, we become more and more refined and in tune with who we really are. And through who we really are, that knowledge, we're able to become better and understand our own habits, understand our own flaws, understand how we can navigate a world of great challenge and difficulty, but how we can also offer up a kind of best versions of ourselves, to quote probably every self-help person in the world. That's, like I said before, you can't really escape some of these cliches, but if we want to become the best version of ourselves, you cannot even improve on a tiny bit without awareness. So self-awareness is absolutely paramount. And awareness of these barriers to equanimity is really paramount too, as is practicing equanimity. The actual application of it. It's all good talking about it or listening to it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I'm going to try that now. I'm going to be more conscious of my social barrier to equanimity. But it's almost gobbledygook. It doesn't mean anything unless you actually put it into practice too. So these are some of the videos coming up.